Alrighty, this is the NBA bubble effect. My name is Chris Becker, and this is for Marketing 451. Just a little context behind my project. We all remember the 2019-2020 NBA season was in the middle of its, about to be its end of the season slash postseason stretch, and all of a sudden, a French center by the name of Rudy Gobert coughed on a couple of microphones and infected the whole league with COVID-19, thus shutting the league down and suspending play until they could figure out what to do. And what was announced was the NBA bubble. And as we know, the NBA bubble was a completely different dynamic than an ordinary NBA game. There's no fans, there's no travel. All the players are in one hotel, resort setting. They see each other after games. And this dynamic seemed to bring an unusual amount of memorable moments, such as TJ Jordan, I mean Warren here, putting up crazy stats like that. Devin Booker's and the Suns going on that incredible 8-0 run, and then Damian Lillard and his consistent, compelling performances that led the Blazers to clinch the eighth seed. So all these phenomena going on kind of left me with some questions. One, is there any I was wondering if there's any significant statistical differences between the NBA bubble and previous games in terms of shooting and scoring. It was kind of the talk of the town that all these teams were shooting and scoring at higher rates than normal, and it sure did appear that way. So I wanted to see if there was any merit to that statistically. Two, I was wondering, about home court advantages in the bubble. It's a common notion, that you want to be the home team, and I was wondering if there was still a home court advantage without the presence of fans in the bubble. Some assumptions and exceptions. I focused on regular season games only. Not the playoff encompassed the play, or the bubble encompassed the playoffs as well. I eliminated those games to prevent. That's just a whole nother complicated dynamic that might affect data manipulation. I eliminated stats from the 8 teams that didn't compete in the bubble. So for the pre-bubble stats, I only looked at the 22 teams that competed in the bubble. So I kept the same 22 teams in consideration at all times. And the bubble is a small sample size comparatively. Therefore, the statistics may not be completely representative. And I think that's important to keep in mind. This might not be what would have happened if a full season were in a bubble. But, here we go. Just some pre-bubble averages versus the bubble averages. Just a quick, compare and contrast sort of thing here. As you can see I used Excel's pivot table function, and on the bottom there is the displayed averages for percentages: 3-point percentage, 2-point percentage, free throw percentage, and points. From the left, we see that 3-point percentage was 36%, 2-point percentage was 52, free throw was 77, and the average amount of points was basically 113. And on the right is the bubble averages, and we see increases in all 4 of those metrics. While some may be small, like 3-point percentage only getting a 0.2% increase, some are larger, like free throw percentage bumping almost 2% and points bumping almost 3 points. So I wanted to know, are these differences significant? Because as I touched on in the last slide, it seemed like some of those were kind of small. So I wanted to know when like stats compared to each other, if the differences are significant. So in the top left, for example, I have the points in the pre-bubble versus the points in the bubble stored per game on average. And that, as we talked about, the mean points stored in the before the bubble was 112 by these 22 teams, and then in the bubble was 115. So they did increase. Wanted to know if that was significant, so I did a t-test, and as you see there highlighted, we return a p-value less than 0.05, which means that yes, this difference is indeed significant, and we can conclude that like there was something going on there in the bubble. It was worth mentioning. The other 3 metrics, however, all return p-values above 0.05, greater than 0.05. So these differences are insignificant to each other, meaning they're minor. They weren't drastic, and it's you can't conclude that there's much difference there. So from here, I wanted to run a correlations matrix just to examine the relationships between these variables and not just amongst like variables. So I wanted to look at the pre-bubble correlation and the bubble correlation matrices. And as you can see on the left, 2-point percentage is positively correlated in the pre-bubble, the heaviest, and then 3-point percentage is slightly correlated. Free throw percentage is surprisingly slightly negatively correlated, which I was surprised to find. But upon closer examination of the data, this does make sense, as teams like the Lakers, for example, they shot pretty poorly comparatively in the from the free throw line at the bottom of the league, and they shot pretty moderately to poorly at the 3-point from the 3-point line. So, but yet they still won, had like the third best record in the league. Same thing with the Bucks. They shot poorly from the free throw line, yet they had like the best record in the league that year. So, but in the bubble, however, this did not coincide. The teams with the best records in the bubble shot great from three and free throw, and these had huge spikes in correlation. And this hints at the fact that fan absence made a difference in these metrics, meaning that there might be some connection there between the fans affecting the shots in the regular season. So they focus more on 2-point shots, or it could be just that everyone caught fire at the same time. Who knows? But it explains why good shooting teams outperform poorly shooting teams in the bubble, such as like the Suns and the Blazers, as I touched on earlier, with prolific shooters like Devin Booker and Damian Lillard leading the helm, able to get those shots off, led to higher correlation between the amount of points they scored and their shooting percentages. So the takeaways: in the bubble, teams increased their points per game and their shooting percentages. Although the increases were evident, only points per game was a significant increase, and correlations hint at the relationship between the bubble and favorable shooting conditions. Onto the topic of home court advantage. It's a common notion that teams tend to win more at home. This is expected due to fans' presence, comfortability of just being in the same environment over and over again, and not having to deal with travel, jet lag, time zones, switching, all that good stuff. So, and as you can see on the right, this is reflected in the pre-bubble, as these 22 teams won almost close to 65% of the time at home, and they only won 50% of the time on the road. So onto the NBA bubble, I wanted to see if this same kind of trend existed. And as you can see here, teams still tended to win more at home when they were the quote unquote at home team. This was unexpected to me due to the absence of fans, travel, and all the metrics I discussed earlier. But you can still see in the bubble, teams win close to 55% of the time when they're at home and only win close to 45% when they were away. What's the cause of this? That's what led me to my next question. Obviously, home teams, quote unquote, have to be doing something better than these away teams. So I wanted to look at their shooting metrics to see if there was something that could explain it there of home, what teams average at home versus what they average away. And teams average a higher 2-point percentage and 3-point percentage when they're the quote unquote home team than they do when they're the away team. However, free throw percentage stays relatively the same and actually increases for away games, which was interesting to me. So from here, I ran a bubble regression. I used the stats from teams that competed in the bubble to see what most affected their win percentage. And this shows that 2-point percentage, 3-point percentage, rebounds, and steals were the significant factors to a team's winning percentage in the bubble. As you can see, we have an R square of 0.71, which means 71% of that data can be interpreted by this regression. And it just shows that teams that perform good in these stats win at home, which is why it makes sense with the correlation matrix that we saw earlier that revealed that 2-point shooting and 3-point shooting was important. It also makes sense why free throw percentage in the last comparative analysis didn't really change among home and away teams. It's because regardless of free throw percentage, these stats are the more significant contributors to a team's winning percentage. So home teams display more competence in these areas, therefore they get more wins. Some general takeaways is just that teams benefit from home court advantage regardless of environment. And the bubble highlights many possibilities as to why and suggests that the previous metrics volume home court advantage aren't sufficient. Perhaps there's an underlying psychological effect that is associated with simply being the home team, such as, they did try to simulate a home court advantage with having the players displayed on the LED, having their names called, having their normal music play. So maybe that was enough to fire them up enough psychologically over their competing away team to play better. All the sources I used were from NBA.com and the links there. Thank you for listening. Have a good day.